Massive Russian convoy said to be filled with food, water, and medical supplies is now in a holding pattern, stuck at the moment in the southern city of Voronezh, about 350 kilometers from the Ukraine border. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says he's worried the convoy is a Russian ploy to invade his country. For the latest, let's go to CCTV's Kate Parkinson, who's live in Donetsk. Kate, I understand there's been a major escalation of violence.
Well, yes, there certainly has. And just a few moments ago, we heard extremely heavy shelling just in the distance there. This is an illustration of just how serious the fighting is getting in the east of the country. And in fact, new figures released today by the United Nations show that the number of people killed in the conflict here in the east of the country has doubled in the past 2 weeks. The United Nations say that over 2,000 people have now been killed in the conflict in eastern Ukraine since mid-April, when Kiev first sent its troops into the Donetsk and Luhansk regions to fight against the pro-Russian rebels in this part of the country. A spokesperson for the United Nations said that that figure includes Ukrainian soldiers, rebel groups and civilians, but said it's a very cautious estimate and says it illustrates a worrying escalation in the number of people being killed. And as I say, standing here in Donetsk right now, a city surrounded by the Ukrainian armed forces, one of the last remaining rebel strongholds, and listening to the shells, to the artillery and to the machine gun fire in the distance, it's really clear that this is showing no sign of slowing down.
It was expected that the convoy had to arrive at the Kharkiv region, and in one of the border points, it has to stay in the transit zone while Red Cross representatives check the convoy. That was the first bit of information. Now we have information that the convoy will not go there. We still don't know where it will go.
What you've just heard there is a spokesperson for Ukraine's military talking about the convoy, this convoy that you mentioned earlier that sent alarm bells ringing in Kiev when it set off from Moscow yesterday in the direction of Ukraine's border. Now, it's been really slow progress today here in Ukraine as negotiations have been ongoing between Moscow and Kiev as to how, where, even if the convoy will come into Ukrainian territory. And as we just heard the military spokesman saying there, they have no idea where the convoy is heading. Now, actually, late on Tuesday, a spokesperson for Ukraine's president did say that Kiev has agreed to allow the convoy into Ukraine, into its territory. And it said the reason it was doing this was to prevent, quote, a full-scale invasion by Russia. Now, the toing and froing, the indecision that we've seen regarding this convoy is really an illustration of the dilemma that Kiev is facing. On the one hand, it doesn't want to be seen to be turning away much needed humanitarian aid and giving Moscow a moral incentive to intervene in eastern Ukraine. But at the same time, Kiev is extremely nervous that if that convoy comes onto Ukrainian soil, it could become a target for tension and conflict. And in turn, that could provide Moscow for an excuse, for a pretext for a military incursion.
Kate, is there any kind of talk or negotiation going on for some kind of compromise? Perhaps International Red Cross, some type of monitors can get on these convoys, see what's in them, and what's determined that it's safe and it's in fact aid, let the aid get to the people of Ukraine who need it.
Well, that is absolutely a condition that Kiev is laying down. Kiev is not going to let these 270-odd trucks with no idea what's on them, apart from the fact that Moscow says it's food, water, medical supplies. But Kiev is not going to let them come across the border without a thorough check of what is in them. And certainly negotiations are ongoing with members of the Red Cross and also the OSCE that their officials be allowed onto these vehicles to do a thorough check of their contents before they are allowed into Ukraine. But as I said, still a lot of concern that even if they are full of humanitarian aid, even if there aren't any weapons in there, anything that could be used by Moscow to help the rebels, because Kiev accuses Russia of supporting the rebels in the east of the country. But even if these trucks are full of humanitarian aid, there is still a grave concern among the authorities in Kiev that this is some kind of Trojan horse, this is some kind of pretext, some kind of excuse, that game even that Moscow is playing, that will ultimately lead to a Russian invasion of eastern Ukraine. And this is the big fear in Kiev and among Kiev's Western allies, that this is what it's leading up to.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll see what happens with those convoys. CCTV's Kate Parkinson.